Welcome back, my awesome people. Today, I am honored, so honored to be here with Ibrahim Ashmawey, and he is the CEO and founder of Golden Profit Group. Now, we're not talking about stocks today. We're not talking about ETFs today. We're talking something that is actually, I would say, very necessary: healthcare, profits, doctors, private medical practices. I know many of my audience members, you have tons and tons of healthcare stocks and investments, but why not take a look at behind the scenes? What is going on in the healthcare system, especially when it comes to owning your own practice? Trying to make as much money as you can. The same way we're trying to maximize our portfolios, the healthcare system's also trying to maximize theirs. So stay until the end and you will learn so much. As you know, I always bring the best on. Hello, Ibrahim. How are you doing today?
Wonderful, Jacob. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. I know it's a crazy busy time, so I'm so happy that you're able to sit here with me today and talk about some important issues, important discussions that I know not everybody has, but I'm glad that we are able to have them today. So let's just get right into it. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and what inspired you to found the Golden Profit Group, and what service does it provide?
Yeah. So the journey, as many journeys, you start off in one direction and then life kind of takes you in a different direction and you look for the opportunities and that's where you go. So I studied engineering. I worked as an investment banker on Wall Street for a while. And then I started managing projects at different companies and that led me to healthcare projects. And one thing that we found while I was managing these projects is a lot of money to save in order to give companies more profit. And that was something most people don't think about is how much profit can I be making? And when you start looking at where cost savings is and understanding how cost saving works, regardless of what kind of business you have, you start seeing a lot of opportunities. So my career snowballed into a cost saving world where I'm helping companies save money until one day I decided, you know what? Why don't I just do this for myself? Instead of doing it for huge corporations and working for them, why not look at medical practices and doctors, people who are truly trying to help others and they're really trying to do good, but they're just really bad at managing money. And it was actually requested of me. One doctor came to me. He's like, listen, you're doing this for huge companies. Why not do it for my practice? Could that work? And when we looked at his practice, we just found so many holes that we started plugging, helping him make more profit. And then it just went from there.
You know, that's actually a really, really cool concept because when we think of healthcare, we just think of hospitals, doctors, run by the governments. We don't really actually see the behind the scenes of how doctors actually make money. All we hear is, doctors are making hundreds of thousands of dollars, but then we're thinking they're just getting paid a paycheck, just like a regular job. But really, it's
Right.
a pretty much an entrepreneur venture. And so, what would you say is the biggest hole or biggest leak that most private medical practices are experiencing in profitability?
You know what's interesting? Every single potential client I talk to asks me that same question, Jacob. Like, if I can look at one thing, what's it going to be? And that one's going to solve my problem. And I'm going to give you the answer, but the answer is not what you're going to want to hear because it's not going to be, look at this thing. And the answer is actually universal across whatever business you have, whatever service you provide or products you sell. It's always understanding and knowing exactly how much that product or service is costing you. If you don't know right off the bat, like let's say that you mow lawns and that's your business. If you don't know exactly how much it costs you to mow every single lawn, and I mean all in, you take every single expense, every single cost, and you put it in there, and you can tell me this is how much it's costing me, hands down, there's no question you're wasting money and you're losing on potential profit, and it's probably very easy to fix.
And that's why individuals like yourself are well needed and highly needed, because I know a couple of people who are doctors, nurses, been to medical school, but they've never really had a financial literacy course in their program. So there could be that big disconnect, and which we'll talk about in a little bit. But how can a doctor or medical practice actually measure their true profitability of their practice, regardless of just looking at revenue? How can they actually measure that?
Yeah, it's funny. We don't actually look at doctors' revenue unless they ask us to look at that for other reasons. We just need to look at their expenses. And the problem is, if they're, say, selling a pill, in some medicine pill, they're looking at the cost of buying that pill, how much it's costing them, and then how much they're selling it for, and they're thinking that's the profit. Every single penny a business spends needs to be accounted for in how you're costing out your product. Because when you price it out and you sell it to others, that's your only way to make revenue. So that revenue has to cover every single penny that you spend. And sometimes when the doctor doesn't have a good P&L and doesn't know how to read a P&L, then they're missing expenses and they're not putting it into the cost. And so they're not pricing for it. So they're not making up for those expenses. And again, a lot of these principles, it's across any business. A lot of times people, when they want to become leaders or entrepreneurs, are thinking, I have to look at marketing. I have to look at my people. I have to look at my revenue. But they're not thinking, yeah, I have to be able to read a P&L. Every single line item, I should know it, like the back of my hand.
Yeah, so definitely financial literacy is key because reading a profit and loss chart, I'm sure many can do it, but I'm sure others cannot as well. Similar to the previous question, what would you say is the biggest expense that is draining profitability? Is it those dang it tissues that they always try to give us, or what is that major expense?
It's actually not anything when it comes to material, and it's not necessarily labor or overhead, it's inefficiency. So I'll tell you one of the biggest things that, again, all entrepreneurs are afraid of when they sit down to talk about cost saving. They say, listen, you're going to want me to get rid of some of my people. And I love my people. I love my team. I don't want to get rid of anybody. They're like family to me, and they, all that wonderful stuff, which is all great. To date, we've never suggested to ever get rid of labor. But if those people are not actively making you money every minute of every day, it just means that they're not being efficient in the best way. They're not being operatively efficient. So what we do is we look at their time, we look at what they're doing, where they are. We look at even the layouts of some of the offices, and we think, how do we maximize time and effort to bring in more profit? So honestly, if I had to pick one gap, it's just inefficiency. People are not being utilized to their most potential.
That is actually a really common mistake with efficiency. And as you said, it goes across all businesses, even,
Right.
McDonald's. If you're not an efficient worker, you're probably not going to be there any much longer. And so back to the staff point, what will be the first step for a practice that's losing money, but doesn't want to cut staff because maybe it might be someone they've been working for 10, 15, 20 years. So what will be the first step without cutting the staff?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you use the example of McDonald's, right? And McDonald's became really famous with this because of the movie The Founder that came out a few years ago, which I'm not sure if you've seen that film, but
Oh,
it goes through the
definitely.
history. Yeah, the history of McDonald's, right? How was McDonald's built and everything. And aside from it, from Ray Kroc taking it over or whatever, forget about all that. But it delved deep into efficiency. What made McDonald's become what it is today is that they looked at their space, their actual inside the restaurant. Here's where people are standing, and here's what they're doing, and here's how they can move in the most efficient way to get as many burgers out as possible. And then Ray Kroc saw that and he said, this is genius. I can change the world with this. And he did, right? So being able to look at your practice and look at your people, where are they? What are they doing? Okay. And what are they doing in which parts of the office? And for how long are they doing it? Every single minute that someone is working, how much profit are they bringing in during those minutes? And how much idle time is being spent? This reminds me actually of a friend of mine in Dallas, Texas, who he created this business. It's really interesting, actually. He took a warehouse, okay, and he put a bunch of LED strips all over the warehouse, okay, like on the floor. And you'd wonder, like, what kind of business is this? But basically, when people want to build restaurants or build offices or even build factories, and they have a plan, like a diagram of how they want to do their layout, they go to him and they say, show me what this layout would look like because they want to see the layout before they actually build it. And so he would turn on the right LED lights. He'd say, like, okay, according to your plan, this is what your office would look like. And then they sit there and make the changes, make it more efficient before they actually build it. So he was also like kind of in the efficiency business, helping people decide what the layout of their offices are even going to be before they go out and build it for efficiency.
Wow. I think that is so necessary, like for everybody, even when you're building your own home, because efficiency can really
Exactly.
go a long, long way, right? Like imagine the one of the bathrooms was maybe 3 minutes of a walk compared to moving it around, and it's only a 10-second walk. That's actually
Right.
so intelligent. And so just to continue with that, how can doctors or what metrics should every doctor review monthly to make sure that they are in good financial health?
Yeah. So the number one is always going to be the cost of your service, and that changes month to month, right? You want consistency and you want it to go down month after month. If it's not going down, eventually it will hit a plateau. Expenses are never going to be zero, right? You're always going to have expenses, but you want to be able to see that the cost of your service or product going down until you feel it's at the most lean or most efficient. So you have to be tracking that month to month. If the cost of your service is going up, then you know that you're doing something wrong and you're spending too much money somewhere. That's going to be the first thing to actually spark it, right? And when you have the breakdown of your service and the breakdown of your costs and knowing how much is going into it, you'll know if it's the labor, if it's the overhead, if it's the material. I think the second thing that people should be looking at, and again, across all businesses, is just how much you are spending on raw materials as well. A lot of times when people start buying something and they're just a startup, and then 5 years later, they're now buying it in bulk and they're buying a lot more, but they never really negotiated the cost to bring it down. I was buying 100 of these things, now I'm buying 10,000, but I'm still paying the same cost. It's because they never really paused to look at, can I find a better source? Can I find a better deal?
Yeah, they definitely have to shop around because if you're going from 1,000 orders to 10,000 orders, I'm sure most manufacturers or companies would definitely give you some type of discount. It's all about asking, right? What's the worst you're gonna get? A no. So
Yeah, the problem is there's assumptions. People assume that they're getting the best deal because they're assuming that if I buy a certain amount or I've spent X amount of years with some vendor, that they have an automatic deal that kicks in. And that's not the case, right? That's not what happens. You
it's
have to
yeah.
be able to shop around. You have to be able to continue to negotiate and argue. And that's what business is all about.
Exactly, because the same way you're growing, that company's probably growing and is able to give you a much better price. So now looking at technology, especially now in the world of AI, it's taking over healthcare, pretty much every sector. How can technology reduce the financial waste without disrupting patient care or quality of care?
Yeah. I mean, you're touching upon two really important things. One is technology, and one is the quality of the patient care, right? And they should be going hand in hand. However, when it comes to the quality of the patient care, one of the biggest hurdles, and it's more of a psychological hurdle that I've seen with entrepreneurs and businessmen, is that they fear that if I'm cutting costs, that means that the quality of my product or service is going down, right? And if you do it in a sloppy manner, that could definitely happen. What they need to be, what the shift, the paradigm shift they need to be having in their minds is not that I am cutting costs, it's that I'm becoming more efficient. That means that I was wasting money. It's not that I'm going to be, just being cheaper. I was wasting money and now I'm not going to be wasting that money anymore. That's one side. Now, how do you use technology for that? I'm sure in your interviews, you've been seeing AI coming into almost every single thing. That's my assumption.
Oh,
Like,
every interview.
yeah, okay. And just out of curiosity, before we get into it with healthcare, out of all the people that have been using AI and talking about it with you, how many of them felt that it's really making their business more efficient?
I would say It's growing. So I would say
Growing.
out of 100 interviews, let's say last year, I would say about maybe 30 might say that AI is really helping them out. But so far this year, I've interviewed over 50 people, and I would say more than 60 to 70% are now fully using AI to help them with in their, tedious day-to-day work, like going through
Right.
financial plans and so on.
That's awesome. Yeah, and a lot of times when people think about AI, they think about what can AI do for me that is tedious. It's mind numbing. I don't need to be thinking about it. With healthcare, it's a challenge because AI right now is reading graphs and reading images, whether it's images of the brain or images of bones. It's reading scans, reading for radiology, looking for cancer. One client I was working with, they wanted to utilize it for reading something called diabetic retinopathy. That's basically an image that they take of the eye. And that image is supposed to tell doctors if the person has diabetes or not, and if the diabetes is ruining this patient's eye. And so usually what happens is an optometrist or an ophthalmologist is looking at that image and they're determining, does this person have diabetes or do they have cataracts or do they have glaucoma, etc. And now certain companies have been coming up with AI readers. However, what we saw was so far, the AI is not able to read as efficiently as an ophthalmologist. And a lot of the images, it would say, I can't read this one, I can't read this one, I can't read this one. And then when the company looks at it, it's like, actually, this is probably readable. Let me give it to a doctor, and the ophthalmologist is actually able to read it. So where AI, I think, is useful in healthcare so far is doing the tedious things. It can be booking appointments. It can be rescheduling appointments. It can do certain things with patient data, obviously within HIPAA laws and that kind of thing. Where I think it still has a few years before it gets there is replacing the actual doctor in being able to read and understand and diagnose. So the diagnostics piece is going to take a while, especially because you need FDA approvals with all those anyway, right? So from an investment perspective, though, it's going to happen. Like, I think we all know it's going to happen eventually. So to be able to find the right companies and invest now and have the patience to go through FDA approvals and for the technology to be perfected, that we're talking like a 10-year plan kind of, but it's definitely something that could be lucrative.
Yeah, and just to stay on that topic, as you said, AI is not going to replace doctors, but do you think there will come a time where it's going to be AI, doing the surgeries, AI, doing the appointment checkups, actually having a conversation with you? Do you think AI will ever get to that point where it can actually replace the human doctor?
You've heard of, I'm sure, situations where patients get sick and they don't know what's going on. They go to a couple of doctors, they get different answers. Then they type all the symptoms in ChatGPT and it gives them the right one. I actually read a news article about that. That's replacing the doctor on a personal level. If I choose to do that with ChatGPT and not go to a doctor, that's kind of already happening. The doctor, ChatGPT can't write a prescription for you. Doing surgeries is really interesting. You may have seen like the original Terminator way back in the day, and it kind of opens up with this company doing that. And it has the big thing about surgeries is that it needs to be partnered with robotics. So AI can be that smart to look into a body, see what needs to be done. That's not too far away. But to have the robotics to match that and be able to move with that kind of precision, I think the marrying of those two has to happen first. So is it going to happen eventually? Sadly, I think yes. I think everything is going in that direction. The
Yeah.
big question, and I'm sure you've been seeing this a lot with people you've been talking to, way back when, if we read our history in the Industrial Revolution, people thought they were going to be out of jobs, right? We're not going to be farming anymore. All these tractors are taking our jobs. And what it actually meant was we're still going to have the same number of jobs, if not more, basically to change. It's going to be a different kind of job. Instead of me farming with my hand or with my mule, I'm now farming with the tractor. I got to know how the tractor works. And then same thing happened with the information age, right? Computers are going to be taking over all of our jobs. What happened? We now have more computer programmers than ever, and the jobs are actually more, but now you have to know how to talk to a computer, and that's how you work. Now it's going to be the same thing with AI. AI is not going to be taking over our jobs. We just now have to change our jobs to be able to talk to the AI, which people are slowly learning.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. Great example with the Industrial Revolution. For the past 10 years, everyone is saying, I'm going to lose my job to AI. AI is going to take over my job. And, unfortunately, yes, that will happen to some sectors. But as you said, right, it's going to create more jobs in different ways that we never even knew existed, thanks to
Right.
AI. And now going back to the medical practices, why do you think some medical practices fail, even though they have amazing patient demand? Sometimes I'll see, a lineup around a medical center because it might be the only one, but then a couple years later, it's shut down. Why does
Right.
that happen?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because sometimes you find doctors who are really good at what they do, right? But they're not able. If you're going to pinpoint one thing, is they're not looking at their practice as a business. They're thinking of themselves not as businessmen, but just as a doctor. And so what I have to be doing is taking care of my patient. And if I'm able to make my patient better and able to make him get over his illness, then that should mean more business. It's the same as any other business. If you're not doing all the other things that a business needs to be doing, and you stop thinking of yourself as a doctor and think of yourself as a leader and an entrepreneur in a business. What does that mean? It means that there needs to be marketing. There has to be efficiency. There has to be a P&L. If you don't have profit coming in, I mean, man, I was just talking to a company yesterday, okay, that they sell, we were talking about diabetic retinopathy. They sell cameras that takes the picture of the eye to be read by a doctor. And they have a lot of customers. They're bringing in revenue of millions. And now they're going out of business. It's because they
Wow.
were not looking at their costs. They weren't looking at their profit. They have this idea of, well, let me just continue to increase the revenue. Increasing revenue could be a smoke screen. You're covering your actual inefficiencies and your holes, and you're just trying to increase your revenue. If every single camera I sell, if I only sell one piece of whatever it is, let's say I sell cookies, if selling this one cookie is not making me a profit, what makes me think that selling 1,000 of these cookies is going to make me a profit? Right? Like, it's not just about revenue, it's not about scale. You have to be efficient from the beginning, from the get-go. And a lot of people starting off, right, they make their own practice and they think that, let me just push and get more revenue, and I'm going to spend money on marketing, I'm going to spend money on my office and making it look nice and all this stuff, and Google ads and YouTube ads. If your profit is not there from day one, it's not necessarily going to be there after 10 years. And then eventually you end up in these situations where doctors are not able to sustain. Because remember, one of the first things we said, they're not able to read a P&L. They don't even know what a P&L is.
That is honestly very unfortunate. And is it the doctor? Because as I mentioned earlier, they don't teach financial literacy in medical school.
Right.
Is that because the medical school is assuming that the doctor is going to work for a hospital and not for themselves? Or should a doctor be more proactive and kind of go out of their way to learn it themselves? Why don't they teach financial literacy or how to manage a practice or how to run a practice in medical school?
Yeah. I wish what we're talking about was just within medical school, but they don't teach financial literacy in any school, right? Unless you're learning finance. But a lot of people who go into business and they want to make their own business, regardless of what it is. I mean, look, people just going into life. How about let's pause on business for a second. If you want to grow up, get a job, get married, do your taxes, and have kids, schools don't teach you how to even do your taxes, right? They don't teach you how to manage your money. So our schooling system has a huge gap in financial literacy, regardless of what you're learning, unless maybe just finance is the only exception. But yeah, med school and other kind of schools, they don't teach you financial literacy. They don't teach you how to run a business efficiently. And so what are people doing? They're kind of resorting to learning a lot of this stuff online. And online, I mean, we're talking online right now. There's a lot of great stuff online, right? But we now have generations of people, and these are our doctors, by the way, the people who are treating us, who don't read books, who have difficulty writing emails, who don't know how to have conversations with other people because of what social media has done and what phones have done with our minds and kind of cutting human interaction. And so the only place they have to learn how to make a business is to go online. You can find a lot of great stuff on YouTube and a lot of wonderful stuff online, but you also find a lot of hacks, right? Who are going after sound bites, dishing out business, advice. When at the end of the day, they're just, influencers trying to sell you on a course or whatnot. So that people end up getting wrong information and going after wrong advice. I mean, how many times have you heard, right? The number one thing about any business is marketing, or number
Exactly.
one thing in any business is your people. If your people are good, then you're golden, or XYZ, right? Any one of those, you're going to find some business guru saying this is the most important thing. Well, great. Let's say I have the best marketing in the world and I have the best people and I have the best whatever, but my profit sucks. I'm not making money. How long is that sustainable? How long can you push that?
That's a very good point where it's not even about the medical school. It's like no school is teaching financial literacy. So, because every career choice can eventually become a business. But, you're
Right.
absolutely right. They are not teaching it to us. And also, I think when it comes to healthcare, again, the average person like myself, we also don't even see it as a business. We just think it's a service from the government to help us
Right.
out. But we don't even see that, oh, I'm entering a business of that nature. So if I read your history, I read your background, and you've done some amazing things. Can you tell us a story about how you saved healthcare companies $650 million, almost $1 billion? Can you tell us more about that story?
Yeah. It honestly started off as a mistake almost. Okay. I was doing a project for a company, and the project it's really simple, right? They sell these medical devices, and in the medical device, in every single box, is a pamphlet that tells you how to use it. And so they wanted to get some kind of rebate from the government by going green. So he said, let's take that pamphlet out and put it online instead. People can read it online. So very simple project. And I said, you know what? By doing this, there's a cost saving. But how much is that cost saving? Is it just simply the price of the paper? But it's not. Because when you take out that paper, the paper was pretty bulky. That means the product weighs less. That means that your freight and shipping is cheaper. That means that you can make the box smaller and therefore buying smaller boxes and fit more of them on a shipping pallet. That means that everything is going to be cheaper after that. No more person to put it in. And you're cutting so many other costs, but nobody could calculate just how much money we were saving. So I kind of took it upon myself. I didn't have to, but I was like, let me see how much we're actually saving from doing this one simple move. And the number was astronomical. Like we couldn't even fathom how much money is being saved. So then when we did it, I was like, well, what else could we be doing? These very small, simple moves to actually be saving more money. And then I started looking at like the most smallest, minute things. Like you have these medical devices and they have like, some of them are gold plated for what reason? Not to make them look nice, but for actual functional use. Well, if it's 3 micro inches versus 5 micro inches, how much does that affect the device and how much money am I saving there? Once you start looking, and it's kind of the same as looking at your own financials, right? If you don't look at your financials on a month-to-month basis, your own personal spending, you don't know how to save money because you're not looking at it. But when you actually look, and I'm sure you've heard the example a million times of like, how much are you spending on a cup of coffee, right? And are you getting it from Starbucks every day versus doing
Yeah.
it at home? Or how much are you spending on Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Disney Plus, HBO, ESPN? But how many of those are you actually watching on a day to day? It's there's so many of those examples. You're not going to be able to know how many things are on, auto pay until you actually look, right? If you, in today's world, we're in a subscription world, right? How many do you have subscriptions? You probably don't even know. You're only going to know if you look at your bank statement, right?
Yeah.
And it's scary. No matter how many times you filter them out and you try to clean them up, they're just going to keep adding on. So people aren't looking at that piece. And once we started looking, honestly, Jacob, it snowballed. And then once I started talking to more and more people, they're like, well, hey, I know how to save money. I want to do this. I want to change this. I want to change this. And we had these ideation sessions on to, guys, what are you doing that is a waste of money that you've always felt could be saved, but there was nobody to go to? And then when I started becoming that person, people came to me with their ideas. And then you find that it's a paradigm shift in your life. Everything changes when you start looking at profit. Because if I'm going to say one thing that I hope your audience takes away, like if they're going to pay attention to one small thing, there are people out there spending millions of dollars actively trying to get you to spend money. Okay? They're thinking of every single way to mess with your mind to convince you to subconsciously spend money. You need to be aware of that, or else you're never going to be able to block their efforts and actually save money. So you have to combat all of their efforts and do efforts yourself to save money. You're just not aware of how much marketing is going on around you.
I love that. I love that wisdom and advice, because it's really just the small little changes that can make such a massive impact to your profit and loss margins. And I think, just by taking all that paper out, changing the box size, little things
Right.
that, I mean, sometimes I'll order one thing from Amazon and it comes in a massive box, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just needed, you could have done it in an envelope or something.
A
But
waste of paper, a waste of everything.
exactly. And I think that's a very good point. And I think that is something that I think your system can go to many, many other businesses and entrepreneurs. And to stick with the profit systems, I know you mentioned the plug and play profit system for doctors. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So what we do is, we look at people's services and we try to make them really think of every single expense they have. Okay. And that's the biggest problem, is that they forget some of their expenses. Unless you have really good P&L, they're not going to be remembering all of their expenses. So they're going to miss a lot of things. And that's one of the things we try to challenge doctors. Hang on, is this really everything you are spending? And that in itself is a challenge. There was one doctor I talked to. He's like, all right, let's get started. What do you need? I told him, give me 3 months expenses. He's like, I don't really have that. I can give you last year's expenses. I'm like, what do you mean? Why last year's? He's like, oh, well, I have it for taxes. I said, okay, but you don't have 3 months? He's like, no, I don't look at my expenses every month. He looks at it once a year. Imagine how many things we
Wow.
found
And
with
pretty
someone.
much for
This is a
tax
doctor.
purposes.
Exactly. He's a dentist and he's big and but the problem is, when revenue's coming in and month to month you feel like you're okay, you think everything's fine. Why do I need to look at my expenses? Right? So you become more of a money spending machine, rather than you're a payroll machine, more than an actually a good efficient business. And one of the examples we try to give people, who isn't trying to lose weight? Everyone wants to be more fit and more lean, and everybody wants a six pack and all that stuff. When you think about it, you have to become lean first before you start adding on the muscle. If you want a six pack but you have a little bit of a pudge, if you start doing sit-ups and all these ab exercises without first getting rid of the pudge, what's going to happen? You're going to have a lot of muscle, but it's covered by a layer of fat. Right? So what does it look like? It actually looks like you're just getting bigger and bigger and have a bigger stomach, because you never got rid of that layer of fat first. So what we say is, pause the growth, stop trying to grow muscle, stop trying to grow revenue, stop the marketing, stop all that stuff, get lean first. It's not going to become easier as you go on. The best time to be lean is as early as possible. And if you've already been in business for 10 years, fine. It's better than 20 years, because you're getting more and more stuck in your ways. Pause, become lean first, and then you can start to add on muscle. And every muscle you add on after that, your abs are going to look even better.
Wow, great analogy because I think that's exactly what's happening. People are worried about what's coming in, but they're not worried
Right.
about what's going out. And I think the
Exactly.
ab example, right? You can be the strongest company, but if you still have that pudge, it's not going to be visible. You're not going to see the progress. You're just going to think, oh, okay, this is what I did this month without really knowing why. And so obviously, the return on investment, when these medical practices use your plug and play system, what does the return look like? Is it more just financial return, or is there also a increase in patient walk-ins? What does that look like?
That's a good question. So, on average, the minimum that we save people is around 10 to 12%. That's the absolute minimum. We've had up to, I think, 55% in profit growth. That was one of our largest examples. So from a return on investment piece, well, first of all, our business model, we look at your expenses and we help you save money, right? So your investment is very, very little. It's more time that you're spending with us to allow us to look at your expenses, and we find the inefficiencies. So it's really win-win in every single situation we've had. There's never been a practice that we've worked with that we have not helped them save money and increase their profit. The good thing is two things. Number one, when you become more efficient because your labor is becoming more efficient, or your area and your office is becoming more efficient, that usually means that you're able to see more patients, and therefore not just is your profit getting better and your cost getting less, but as a byproduct of the work we're doing, your revenue is getting better. So that's one thing. On top of that, now with more profit, you usually have more money to spend on other things. Maybe you wanted to buy new medical devices or upgrade your systems. Maybe you wanted to open a second location, but you never could because you never had the extra cash. Now you actually have that ability to grow your business.
And I think that is definitely worth it. Even just a 10% gain can make
Right.
wonders in your practice, in your business. I know many doctors who, they drive the nicest cars, they live in the nicest,
Yeah.
biggest houses, but you just think, oh, it's because they're a doctor. You don't really see them as business individuals or entrepreneurs. And so, how do you measure success? Would you say it's money saved or profit retained?
Well, it's not what kind of Ferrari you have. I mean, right now, everyone's building a brand, right? And there's smoke screens, and you can't trust what you're seeing online. Everyone's building a brand. No one's building a business. And you can have the cleanest brand in the world, and the brand is you, right? It's what you look like. But your system could be completely broken. And people need to understand that social media for your practice, that's not going to replace a true business strategy. And a lot of entrepreneurs are trying to avoid these hard truths because we see what's online and we think that that is success. If your revenue is $5 million a year and you're only keeping 300,000 of it, that's a complete failure. That is not a sustainable business. And just think of the amount of money that is wasted that could be kept in your pocket, or could be going into R&D, or could be growing your business, or if you're truly altruistic, could be helping more patients, right? If you're truly a good doctor and you can open more than one location, you're going to be helping more patients. So you're not doing anybody any favors by not making enough profit. And I don't know, Jacob, like from the people that you talk to, a lot of people I talk to, especially doctors, there's a stigma around money. They feel like talking about money is dirty, is bad. It means that you're a bad person. Why do you care about how much money you keep? You should only be caring about doing good in the world, etc. When I try to challenge them to say, how can you be doing good if you don't have the money to sustain your business? It's ultimately going to get shut down.
Exactly. And that is definitely not a good return. If you're bringing in millions, but you're only profiting a few hundred thousand, it's definitely there is a disconnect. Where are you
Right.
losing money? Where is that hole? Where is that leak? And I think, you know, if a doctor sees hundreds of thousands coming profitability, they probably think, hey, this is great. I'm doing amazing. When really they could have much more at the end of the day. Now, obviously, a lot of doctors are, you know, aging out. A lot of doctors who have medical practices, they're usually a little older, not as tech savvy because, you know, technology moves so fast. What kind
Mhm.
of advice do you have for those doctors, for those non-tech savvy doctors? How can they improve their practice, whether it's using your system or just a good advice for them?
Can I turn that question around a bit?
Of
And
course.
here's what's interesting. At least in the medical world, I'm seeing that a lot of the older doctors that have been doing it for a while are actually better businessmen than the younger generation coming in. And I think it's because
Wow.
they stuck with certain principles. If you speak to an 80-year-old doctor that's had a practice for 50 years, you can be very sure that he knows how to read a P&L, that he knows exactly how much his service is costing him every single day. These are principles that he had to have and he had to build over the years, or else he would not have stayed in business that long. The younger generation, a lot of them are looking for shortcuts. And we're living online right now. So, what are people seeing online is online marketing. And that online marketing truly could be a drug at one point where people become addicted to it. And companies are just addicted to ads and they're addicted to putting more and more ads out there. And they're using it to hide operational rot, if you will. Things going wrong that you think are just more ads is what's going to solve my problem. So if you know and have been using the traditional principles the best and you know how to run a business and from a financial perspective you fully understand your company's finances inside out and they're in your mind and you know exactly how much everything is costing you month after month after month, using technology after that to become more efficient is awesome. That's going to make you that's going to be a superpower. All right, it'll make you the best at what you do. You can control the world after that. You're going to be awesome. But if you don't have the fundamental principles, then no amount of technology can help you. And I always urge people, read the older books, right? Like let's say you're 20 years old right now. You're thinking of becoming a doctor, you're thinking of becoming an entrepreneur. You don't really know yet what you want to do with your life. I'm going to say read a book that was written more than 20 years ago just to understand fundamental principles. Stuff like, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. If you're going to pick one business book in the world that everybody should read, regardless of what you get into, it's that, right? It just teaches you motivation and finding a purpose and knowing what you want to do and understanding how important money is and being able to read money. People are skipping the fundamentals.
You know, that's actually a very, very interesting point because I'm assuming, and I'm sure many people assume, the older doctors don't know what they're doing in this new world, and then the younger doctors are the ones, you know, trailblazing. But really, it's the opposite, right? Like a book from 20 years ago is probably going to give you a better fundamental, a better foundation in business and
Right.
entrepreneurship rather than, you know, John Smith on YouTube telling you to buy his $900 course. So that's actually a really good point. I think a lot of people are going to actually be shocked at that information, but I'm sure many doctors and medical practices will definitely take that advice and start utilizing it. So thank you for that. And Ibrahim, on this channel, we actually have a small segment that I ask you three out of the box questions that have nothing to do with our interview.
All
Are you
right.
up for it?
I'm so ready. Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, so the first question is, if Golden Profit Group was a person, what type of personality would they have?
A contrarian. This is somebody who's going to be probably looking at what everybody is saying and just for the hell of it, go against the social norms and try to give you a different perspective. I don't see this person falling in line with a lot of normal ideas out there. And unfortunately, that's kind of been me my whole life. And it makes you have some good friends, but a lot of people end up, you rub them the wrong way.
I love that. A contrarian. I love it. Okay, second question. What is the most random app that you've downloaded in the past or you currently have? I know some people have like a sunset app or a meditation app. What is a random app that you may have?
So I'm not into the games really. A lot of games that people love that get very addicting. I try to actually stay away from anything that can become an addiction. Okay,
Yeah.
especially on phones and social media and video games. I think my only addiction has been caffeine, and I've just accepted that vice. And that's I drink way too much coffee and way too much Diet Coke in my life. Um, I think the most unfortunately, it's got to be DoorDash, and it's not too random, but DoorDash way too much, especially for the kids. Every single day they want something, and anytime they have friends over, DoorDash is the go-to. I've actually been contacted by DoorDash a couple times. They're like, "You're ordering a lot. If you want to open a business account or something with us, we can give you some discounts." And that's kind of like a wake-up call. We're talking about subscriptions, right? How much money people spend. I
Yeah.
mean, how many apps and how many things are people spending money on apps, you know?
That is amazing. You guys could have been sponsored by DoorDash.
Next time,
um,
yeah.
Last question. So if you were not an engineer or in investments or in healthcare, what totally unrelated career would you be in?
Ooh, I like that question. Um, Jacob, I believe that we live in a world right now where people are defined by what they do. Okay. And not just, it starts off with other people wanting to look at you. And I only want to see one thing. I want to see this guy as a doctor, for example. And they
Yeah.
forget that humans are multifaceted, right? So I struggled with that earlier on because I loved a lot of different things until one day I was like, you know what? I can be this and this and this, and it's no problem. It took me a while to accept that. So actually, one of my hobbies that I've always had my whole life, and I've always been working on it, is filmmaking. And my
Nice.
brother and I, yeah, we both love film, and we actually have a couple movies that are out there, and they're on Amazon Prime, and you'd find us on IMDb. And we just filmed a movie last year with Matthew Lawrence from a lot of the old Disney shows in the '90s, and David O'Hara. So something that I love, and I'm always going to love it, and I'm always going to work on it. It's just that I don't have to be defined as a filmmaker. It's just something that I love and something that I do.
Honestly, that is amazing. I'm definitely going to check those movies out. I love movies as well. I love TV shows, cinematography. So I am all into it. So thank you for that information.
Awesome.
Ibrahim, before we end off this interview, where do you see a long-term vision for Golden Profit Group, say in the next 3 to 5 years? Or you can also talk about just healthcare in general, what that's going to look like in the future.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'd love to end by talking about both. And, Golden Profit Group, honestly, I'm trying to help as many doctors as possible who are trying to help people, but they're struggling. And they're struggling because they're really good doctors, but they are not the best at numbers. So we will help you with that. That's what we want to do for you, is really easily make some small changes in your business to help you help more people. So the more doctors I can help, I think that, if from different directions, I'm able to help more patients. And that makes me feel really good, and my team feel like we're doing something at the end of the day that's good for society at the end of the day. That's really important. Whatever it is that you do, you should feel that it has a good purpose and it has a good message and that you're doing good. We're all here to do good. And if every human being does a little bit of good in the world, then that makes the world a better place, And I know it sounds a little bit rosy and maybe a little bit cliche, but it's a reality if you think about it. Where healthcare is going, definitely the technology is coming in. Definitely the AI is coming in. I think right now, society is bubbling. Okay. And what I mean by that is we went from riding horses and carriages for hundreds of years to all of a sudden we're driving a car. And within 60, 70 years of, driving a car, we're flying airplanes and we're on the moon. Right. It went very, very, very fast. And now with smartphones and now with technology and now with how fast did we go from internet to AI? It was just, it almost exponential if you look at the history of the human race. So right now we don't know where things are going to end up. It's like a pot of water, and it's bubbling and it's going crazy, and you don't know what it's going to look like when the water calms down. Where are we going to end up as a race, as a society, as a world? And so where I hope it goes is that we're in a place where we're able to utilize technology to serve us, but always maintaining the human element, which is what makes us a society.
That was very well said. And I personally hope so as well, where healthcare gets better, it's treating patients a lot better, there's efficiencies, there's no shortcuts, and of course malpractice to be at a hopefully at an all-time low,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes when you take those shortcuts, you could do some damage. But
Absolutely.
yeah, it's actually great to know that there is a future for healthcare, especially using technology. So Ibrahim, thank you so much for that wisdom. I loved every single point you made in this interview. I know a lot of my audience members feel the same way because we are now looking at the behind the scenes. Now, every time I
Mm-hmm.
drive by a doctor's office or a hospital, I'm not thinking, oh, this is a government business or a government
Right.
entity. This is Dr. John Smith's practice, and he has to do all
Exactly.
the entrepreneurship, all the business foundations, all of that stuff on his own, or he can utilize his knowledge, use companies like yourself to make his practice a lot more efficient. So the behind the scenes, that was amazing. I'm still shocked at all the new information I learned today. So audience members, I will have all of Ibrahim's and Golden Profit Group's information in the description box. And if you're also interested in the movies he's created, please check him out. We love multifaceted individuals who have hobbies, who have passions. So audience members, you can always reach out if you have any questions, and I'm always bringing you the best guests. So please make sure you like and you subscribe. Ibrahim, thank you so much for being here with me today. It's been
Thanks
a
so much.
busy year, and I'm sure you're even more busier now that the next quarter is about to come. So audience, until the next time, stay ranting.